Welcome to the IpX True North podcast, where we connect people, processes, and tools.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the True North podcast. Again, my name is Brandy Taylor, the VP of Services for IpX. And this is a part two, continuing the discussion that we had with Ray and Ken. So hello, gentlemen. It's awesome to be spending more time with you today.
Oh, yeah, right back at you.
Yep. Thank you.
Awesome. We had a lot of really great discussion, and I've been interrogating you on a number of things throughout your careers. So, I'm just going to jump right back in. We made it about halfway through, so we're just going to continue on. And if you guys remember, the last question I asked you guys was about a company just starting up. What would you recommend that they do to start their CM system on a solid foundation? And we had a lot of really great discussion around that. I guess thinking about everything that you guys have done in your career, and it could be with startups, it could be with very huge companies, small companies, mature companies, it could be anything at all. Talk to me about, if you can think about maybe one or two examples of something that you would consider maybe really huge successes. What are the biggest success stories that you guys have seen in your careers?
I'll jump in. I don't know if it's going to be a big, huge success story, but I will tell you that probably about 12 years ago, I had a student come through our professional training courses. She'd been through courses 1 through 6, and she came in and she was from the Boulder area here. And she said that she had taken the courses at a large company before, but she had gone to a startup, and a little startup company in Boulder. I won't mention any company, but it was a small startup company in aerospace. And she was hired to help them do some purchasing, and she was like the 5th person hired, right? And so what she did was, and this had been about 3 years since, and she was coming back for the professional series. And she said the very first thing she did, she talked to the 2 founders of the company, and she said, I think I want to make sure that from day one, we document everything we do and we have it in a single repository. And we need to have things under formal control. And she said they kind of just looked at her and said, okay, whatever you want to do. Right. And so over the 3 years, they hired people, and they were up to, I think, maybe like 90 people by the time she had come through to training stuff. And she said she was able to, because from day one, they bought a PLM tool, and it just happened to be Agile. It was called Agile Lite, right? And they had bought this tool, and she just had all the processes, and they hired people. She would have them write processes for their jobs. And because she was the 3rd employee, everybody thought that she had the power to do that, right? And so she goes, sometimes you just act like you have it and people believe it. And so she said it was pretty amazing that about 6 months before she came to the classes, they were getting ready to ship some product to NASA, and NASA came and did an audit of them, because that's what NASA does, right? They want to see how they operate, how they do everything else. She said they were scheduled to be there 5 days. They were there for 2 days, and said that it was one of the best run companies they'd ever have to interface with. Yeah. So it was great. And she said, because of my training, I was able to go to this company in a role of purchasing, but with this background and able to implement this from day one. And she goes, because we did it from day one, it wasn't hard.
That's right.
Used to it, right? That's the problem a lot of our customers face today, is that they've got this big wheel turning and they're trying to go in and make these changes, and it's really hard. So for a startup, man, if you can do it from day one, it just becomes part of our normal way of doing business and becomes so much easier. And the end of that story is about a year later, she reached out and said that, I just want to let you know I'm leaving the company. And I wrote it back. I go, I'm sorry to hear what's going on. And she goes, no, we got bought out by a much bigger company. And because I was the 3rd employee, I'm never working again. So So it worked out very well. So my belief is that the CM2 best practices and stuff like that played a role in that, right? In that ability for that company to be able to succeed.
No doubt.
Yeah. And if every company could just go back to the very beginning and just start documenting things and have their processes in place and have ownership on their data from day one, oh God, we probably wouldn't be sitting here. We wouldn't have jobs.
And the big thing about that, the reason that if you could start off when an organization or a business is launched, if you could start off at the very beginning, you avoid one of the most difficult parts of organizational transformation, and that's organizational change management. If you start from the very beginning, you completely avoid the organizational change management piece because you build into the initial DNA of the organization, the initial belief system of the company. And just a couple of things that if you put them in place up front, using one strategy that I always express to the people that I deal with, organize and document your information, expecting it to change. If you don't do that, if you just believe for some innate reason that all I got to do is capture this data once and I'm all done, then you're going to really be in for some serious, shocking experiences down the road. So organize your information for change. And boy, Ray, you nailed it again. Data ownership, information ownership. If you can get that kind of activity, that kind of participation in the business where people actually take ownership, I can't tell you how significant that is. When people take ownership, then there's pride in what they do. That's huge. And then, of course, you got to make sure you have the ability to make change. So the change process with the fast track capability. Boy, I'm telling you, any company that's starting out, if they can architect their information for change, have proper ownership, and have the ability to manage change, they're stepping off on the right foot. And I don't care what kind of business you want to talk about, in whatever industry, those three things are 100% applicable.
Those are really good examples. And, I guess, does anything else come to mind? I think that that's a huge one, Ray, with regards to, one specific person. I love that. Like that was, really life-changing for her specifically, and obviously for that organization. Is there anything else come to mind for either of you guys with regards to big success stories?
Well, you know what, when you want to talk about individual success, oh my goodness, I don't remember how long ago it was, maybe 15 years ago. I was doing a public class, and I had an individual from a large European company who was in the class, and we really clicked. We just connected. And he was an individual contributor sent by the company to go through these courses. And he went back as an individual contributor and tried to make things better. Ran into a lot of resistance, but he had that trait that I always look for in a good CM person, tenacity. And he never quit. He never gave up. He kept pushing and kept pushing and kept pushing. Here we are 15 years later, and his career in that company is all based on CM and CM2. And he's been able to implement a lot of the principles. He's been able to build an organization within the company. And you know what? That's not a unique circumstance. There are many examples of somebody who went through our courses as an individual contributor within the organization, and today they're in leadership or management or senior management positions within the company. So it's refreshing for me to see those kinds of successes, not just company successes, but individuals.
I think that's a great marketing thing that we need to focus on. Come through our training and you'll get promoted into senior.
There you go.
But it's so true. It just seems like every company has problems in this area, right? There's no one that I have met, granted, I'm sure if someone is really amazing at doing this, some corporation's really amazing, they're not needing our help, but everyone is having problems. Everyone struggles with this. This is not easy, and everyone does it a little bit differently. So there's always opportunities, and everyone's always trying. No one is perfect. And so there's always opportunities.
You're right. Everybody does it differently, and not very many people do it well.
That's right. Yeah, we're like a doctor for that in some way. Yeah. You're always going to need your doctor. Maybe we're integrative health practitioners.
Integrated corporate configuration management health practitioners.
Surgeons.
There you go.
Yeah.
I like it. That's quite the title, sir. It's a mouthful.
Yes, it is a mouthful. Sometimes those big mouthfuls, corporations love those
They
titles.
do. They do. Another one that comes up all the time, and you guys are going to nod your heads very quickly, is, the ROI, right? It's always important. Good leaders always want to know what's the benefit to the business, right? Is there some financial sense here over just, this is a nice thing to do? So thinking about, the experience that you've had over the decades, what has worked best in companies that you've worked with to build the business case, justify the investment in the resources or whatever it may be to improve CM processes to leadership?
So I'm a little bit of a rebel, I guess, when it comes to this, because I am not a fan of a team of individuals trying to build a formal business case that shows savings that will occur in the future. Because I personally don't know anybody, and don't take this wrong, Ray, I don't know anybody that's very good at forecasting the future. And I mean, if I was good at doing that, I would probably still be here because I love this, but I'd be a lot better off financially because I can foresee the future.
Yeah.
And the thing about building a traditional business case where you have to show where the savings are, what the savings amount will be, and when those savings will occur is dangerous, because it doesn't matter how you preface the data that you present in terms of, well, we think it might be somewhere in the area, approximately around, and this is only a swag, but it's going to be maybe close to, I don't care how many descriptive terms you put in front of it. Once you state the number is the only thing that gets heard. And if that number is not realized, then you failed. I think a better way to build a business case is to show the organization, and you have to do it tactfully because you can't let leadership know they're not running the business very well, but to show the leadership the impacts of the current way of working. And we can do that by going out, doing some interviews and finding out what level of intervention resource expenditure we are currently experiencing within the organization. And, for most companies, and this is so true, for most companies, if you did that and you actually came out with a number that represented the annual amount of intervention resource expenditure within the company, if you actually came out with that number, you couldn't use it. It would be too big. You couldn't present that number to leadership. And I tell my class, look, once you get the number, cut it in half. If you think it's still too big, cut it in half again. It's still going to be compelling. So for me, the way that I would try to go about building a business case would be twofold, two approaches. One is to get a sense of what our intervention resource expenditure is. And two, if you can look at experiences that the organization has had, product recalls, quality failures, gaps in the processes, whatever those things are that have caused angst within the business or cost the business money, and show them that, hey, you know what, if we'd have had these protocols in place, those events would have never occurred.
And what's interesting is that people will be hearing this at different times going forward in the future. But just yesterday in the news, and I won't mention names just to keep it generic, there was a medical device company just announced that they're going to stop producing and shipping a medical device. Done. Around the world, they're going to just stop because they were ordered to recall all their products. Well, I happen to know the company, and we've done some work with another division in that company, but the medical device side never thought they needed help, right? And so their product has technical issues with it. They've lost configuration control of the product around the world. And so now they're just basically folding that business, saying, well, the cost to fix it is going to be too great. And nobody likes to hear cost avoidance, right? Because when the companies go, oh, my cost avoidance. Well, cost avoidance, what's the cost avoidance of stopping shipping a product around the world and having a recall and pay for the recall for all those products and stuff? So yes, corrective action, we can get those measurements.
Yeah. And the tendency oftentimes that we see is organizations look for tools as solutions. And, one of my favorite sayings, I use it all the time, is tools are not solutions. If tools were solutions, most organizations would have zero problems because they got a lot of tools.
Yes.
I love that. And I love everything that you're saying, because we work with lots of PLM providers and organizations that need and want this, but you're absolutely right. And Of course, PLM providers will say that you're going to save, millions of dollars, whatever that may be. And, they have to do that, right? Like they need to justify, they need to prove. But when you think about it from that perspective, like you said, you can't see the future. So sometimes these kind of anything in the future is hard to believe. It seems unrealistic.
Right.
And so to think about things that have happened in the past, I call them case studies, real life examples. It's the repercussions for not changing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that's the
Yeah.
best way to lay out an ROI is to think about it from that perspective. And for me, I struggle because sometimes putting out an ROI is we're talking about, like you said, the foundation. And these are requirements for your
Mhm.
business. So what's the ROI of missing requirements for your business, right?
Yeah.
To me, it's the same thing as missing requirements for your product.
Mhm.
And some companies are successful nonetheless, even with some of these
Yes.
bad foundations, right? But think
Yeah.
about how amazing they really could be and how
Mm-hmm.
successful and profitable they could be if they could just fix a little bit of their foundation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think everybody at IPX is passionate about that foundational stuff. And
Yeah.
probably less than 1% of our customers understand it or are passionate about it until they finally one day, the crack becomes so big in that foundation that it starts eating them up. And then they're going like, oh, wow, we should have fixed this years ago. And yet they're ISO certified. They go for all the audits and we talk to them all the time about how do you pass the audits? And some organizations truly take the audits to heart and they have that culture of, yes, we want to get better. But the majority of the companies that I've worked with that have gone through the audits, it's smoke and mirrors to pass the audit.
That's it.
We don't really want to go through and do all that hard work on fixing all the foundational stuff. So let's get the certificate so we can move on and wait for 2 years till we have to do it again.
There you
Yeah.
go. The magic tool.
So besides the ROI, we know that, we have to work through that many times, but a lot of this is just about leadership alignment too. So from a leadership alignment perspective, what are your tips and tactics? What are your best practices for how you would guide people to achieve leadership alignment?
Yeah, bring somebody from IPX in to do an executive awareness.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it sounds kind of cliche-ish, but we are very good at doing that. We are very good at being able to go in and have that talk with that leadership team and get them to understand why this would be a good thing for their organization to do. I'm only aware of once where IPX went in, had a session with the leadership team that was completely a failure. And that was me. I actually was the one that did that.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. I mean, the whole room was open-minded except for one person. That was the CEO. And as I was giving my presentation and I was looking around the room, I always try to make eye contact. And I could tell that the people sitting around the table, they were starting to get interested. But the guy at the head of the table, I could tell from eye contact that we had, I could tell from his body language, not only was he not getting it, but he wasn't wanting it. And it was maybe 20 minutes into the presentation, he stood up, shut the whole thing down, and told me to pack up my stuff and go home. So, but other than that, IPX, I don't know another organization that could do a better job of going in and helping the leadership team of an organization gain an understanding, at least enough of an understanding to trigger curiosity or interest. And that's all we need. If we just get a foot in the door, we know that we can make a huge difference for that company.
A lot of it, I think, in some light, as anyone who's worked with leaders knows that, pulling everyone together and expecting everyone to agree on something in a meeting can be challenging. And so a lot of it is the meeting before the meeting, right?
Mhm.
And to do your prep work. And
Yep.
if you've got a large group of leaders that are all often in conflict, right? Their goals and objectives often can be in conflict and they don't always align. So just working individually with each of them and understanding what they're passionate about, what are their goals and objectives, what are the things that they're working on, because CM2 is very tactical and it can support any function. So every single leader, we can talk to them individually and help them understand. So sometimes a lot of the prep work, I would say, and making sure that you're speaking their speak and to the things that they're trying to work on individually can often help and then come together. And then everyone's already kind of saying, yep, we agree because it can help me do this. Right.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
You know, Groucho Marx back in his day, he always had the secret void. The secret void when we're dealing with leadership is requirements, because it makes no difference what industry you're talking about, what organization you're looking at, what company it is, what country you're in. It makes absolutely no difference. Everybody is dealing with and facing the same challenge, and that's to properly capture, properly manage, properly change, and achieve requirements. To me, that's the common denominator. That's why there is no industry. You can put me into any environment, I don't care what it is, and I can show them how CM2 would be advantageous for them, because it's all about managing requirements and managing change.
I think about the immense careers that you guys have had to date, and I'd love to hear, can you think of one or two of those moments, like aha moments, like holy crap moments where something just kind of clicked, right? Maybe it's your most important lesson learned or something. Is there anything in time where all of a sudden you just had, oh my gosh, yes, I get it now, and that makes sense to me, or anything like that, kind of those big aha moments?
The aha moment for me, I don't even know when it happened, was to realize how many years I'd actually been doing CM stuff and didn't know it. I think earlier in our first podcast, somebody said something about, I have never met anybody who graduated from school and said, can't wait to get my CM career started.
Right.
And that's true, man. I never thought I was going to have a career in CM. Hell, I didn't even know what CM was, but I was doing things that are all part of it. I mean, I spent a lot of time in my career working with managing the change process and doing change tracking and monitoring the accomplishment of implementation plans, and going out and actually taking care of surplus inventory that was generated as the result of part numbers being replaced through the change process. And I spent the very first job I ever had was going out and finding tools that needed to be reworked as a result of changes. I mean, so many things that I was involved with that were actually elements of CM I never knew until one day the light went on. I went, wow, holy moly, I've been doing this CM stuff for a long time. I don't know when that date was, but yeah, it's pretty
1921, maybe.
1923, somewhere in there.
Ken, I feel the same way though. Like even when I was doing program management, the biggest problems you had was related to change and configuration management. So the way you get things done and hit your milestones was diving in deep, rolling up your sleeves and getting involved and helping make things happen, reaching out to all the far corners of the building and all the different functions engaged and just kind of walking the stuff through, make it happen.
Yeah. I've got two aha moments. One would be on a personal level, because people who become instructors at IpX, and we have instructors worldwide and stuff like that, it's a journey, right? You just don't say, hey, tomorrow I'm going to be an instructor, and you know everything about CM.
Yeah.
Even if you've been through the training and stuff like that, it takes years to become experts at it, right? Because all the experiences with companies and everything else, and just learning all the different things. And I think back then, Ken, if you remember, that was when you had come around and done audits to all the instructors.
Yeah.
And I remember a couple months after that, I was sitting there at the end of class one day, and I was like, oh my God, I get it. I get how everything fits together, how it all fits together and builds upon each other, because we were always training all the different modules and everything else, and you'd focus on them and you'd have an understanding, be able to answer the questions. But the day that I was able to sit there and go like, it all has to fit together, right? It's all built upon and it all just flows together perfectly. That was a big aha moment for me. And that led to a moment where, I don't know, it was probably a year after that I was at a company overseas somewhere. Some of them speak English, some speak broken English in this country. It was a company in Turkey. And I was sitting there at the end of the first day. And so I went to the person who brought me there and I said, so how do you think it went? And this engineering manager goes, well, I've been talking to the people all day long. They're just amazed. They're totally impressed and they see what they need to do and everything else. And I was like, wow. So even with the language barrier, the principles, you could still get them across and everything else. And it was just so powerful that it actually made me feel proud inside that, wow, I'm able to share this information with an organization and they have enough faith and belief that we need to do something, right? And they've done an outstanding job. And I compare them to a lot of the DoD contractors in the US that are still struggling on this journey, just to see how far they've gone, because they had that understanding, but they also had the people, as Ken talked about earlier, with the tenacity, kept on it, and they're pretty gosh darn successful. And to sit there and think that I had a small part of that, it's such a pretty cool feeling, right?
Yes, it takes some time, but people do get it. It does click eventually. And things that you say stick with them, and they don't always understand it right away. And they don't always challenge you, but they come back later, weeks later, months later, and then say, you said this and I get it. And so I've been thinking about that, and it starts to change their way of thinking in general. And it's so magical. And I do love those moments. Like, that's the most valuable thing, is when you get to those kind of relationships with the people you work with and the clients, where you're 100% self, like just candid self. And you can have these dialogues and these conversations, debates, whatever you want to call it. And even if it doesn't sync now, it kind of comes back. It comes full circle. And even, like you said, the magic click moments, like I remember after taking my boot camp with you, Ray, and you sit through and, you're in the midst of so much information. And the reason I was doing it was because things were bad back at the workplace. And you go through this, and at the end, I'm like, okay, we had all of these chapters. Someone pulled these things together in a sequential fashion for a reason. I didn't quite grasp it then, right? It took me a while. And then you sit and I think, I'm like, you know what? There's a story here, and there's a reason that there's a progression in this fashion. And then when you have those moments where it all clicks and it makes sense, it's really neat.
Yeah. You mentioned the story part of it in the CMT training. And first couple hours of class, I always mention to the people, all of you signed up for this training because you're having problems with your change management process and you want answers to that, right? And pretty much 90% of the time, everybody raised their hand. And little did it, and I tell them, so we don't get into the change management process till the third class. So don't be surprised, because we're really not going to talk about change management, but yet we're going to talk about everything that you need to have an efficient change process in place. And that's how our courses are built. So it is that story that says, hey, you got to start at the beginning. And if you start here, it's not going to work. So you got to start at that beginning. You got to tell that story. And sometimes the story may seem a little boring to some people. They're going like, but just to finish that whole thing up, I had who's now a very good friend of mine, a gentleman up in Redmond, Washington. So you can figure out what company it is. Went through my training. 5 or 6 years later, he was sending more people through the training, and we were out having dinner one night, and he goes, I was in a meeting today and we were talking about it. And all of a sudden I found myself, I turned to this person, I said, well, if that was clear, concise, and valid, better. And he goes, in my brain, all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, it all went together in my head, and I get it now. Wow. And I give him a hard time, because I go, gee, it took you quite a few years to get it and everything else. But
yes, sometimes they just say something in passing and I pick up on it. I'm like, yay, they heard me.
Yeah.
Even courses 1 and 2, like I agree. Like the first time I went through it, I still love 3 and 4, right? Those are always my favorite because they're so tactical and they got a lot of program management principles baked in. It took me a little while to come back and be like, have the aha moment on 1 and 2. Right? Because in my head, I want to focus on change process specifically. And that's where 3 and 4 gives me, okay, tactical, great. I can write this down. I can go do something. But 1 and 2 is huge. And once you really get 1 and 2, that's to me when it all kind of fits together and you have those moments.
Yeah. I tell my classes sometimes when we first start off with course 1 that we kind of do rote learning, right? So we're going to tell you what we're going to tell you, and then we're going to tell you, and then we're going to tell you what we told you, right? So course 1 kind of sets the stage. This is what we're going to be talking about, especially the first 4 chapters. And then you start the last half of course 1 and you get into course 2, and you start getting into more of the details, more of the nuance. And then the further you go, we go back and we drill those same principles again in later courses and later chapters, because they're foundational. We have to make sure that those core principles are understood. So there is a story, and it starts off at the 10,000 foot level, Then we drop it down to treetop level. And then the fun part is when we get down into the roots and start getting our hands dirty, when you really get into all the details. That's why you like courses 3 and 4. Brandy, because that's where you're getting your hands dirty. But you need to do it. You need to do that progression. To Ray's point, every student that comes to class is expecting one of two things. They're either going to see their granddaddy's configuration management restated, or they're going to talk about the change process. And they're shocked to find out that neither one of those is true.
I'll beg to differ. I think now that I understand it more, you can really roll up your sleeves in courses 1 and 2 as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
you absolutely can.
Like,
yeah.
oh man, that's some of the hard stuff, the undoing
Yeah.
the decades of whatever people have been doing to try to set new standards. Ooh, that's painful.
Yeah. The real mind blower for most students occurs when we get into the first part of course 2, where we start talking about what if we were able to give our development team a detailed plan that showed them exactly when each data set that they're going to produce has to be released before we even start the development activity. And we do in the CM2 process. I mean, that's earth-shaking. Organizations don't do that. If they haven't gone through CM2 training and are applying the CM2 principles, I have never seen an organization that gave the development team that level of detail in a development plan.
We have that workshop where we talk about defining requirements in course 2. And I always talk to people and I'll tell them, hey, and we kind of show it in a little bit in course 1 and 2, but I say in courses 3 and 4, you're going to see how all these things that you're talking about, they need to be released and part of our structure from day 1 in my repository where all my product data is. And 80% of the time, people, well, we don't do that today.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we get into the subject of the digital thread and we say, well, where's your digital thread start? It starts with those requirements from the contract, right. All that stuff. Why would that not be in your corporate change process, in your corporate repository, not on some program manager's hard drive?
Yeah.
And they all go, oh, yeah, we need to go back and talk about that. And it's like getting your hands dirty. But sometimes those simple, basic things that people are going like, well, yeah, it should be in our corporate repository. Why isn't it? Right.
Yeah, there's that common sense again.
Yeah, it's just legacy, just the way we used to do it. And it's just been kept that way. And we don't want people to be able to go in and see it. And it's like, you guys heard of security and all that stuff. Like those apples built in there and stuff like that. But it's just always amazing. I love those workshops where we go through and develop the requirements. And then we using the same product. We then have them build a product structure for a product. And just to see them, some get it right away, some struggle with it. But immediately, what are they learning? They're learning about the vertical and horizontal linkages.
Yeah.
Yes.
And very powerful.
I think so many people like to, focus, narrow in their blinders on their favorite phase in the life cycle, right? Like I'm a designer, I'm an innovator, I live here, right? And so that's why I think that some of these things that sounds like foundational principles really are aha moments, because people need to recognize that there's so much more and that they really do relate and influence so much more than just this piece.
For me, that's why course 5 is one of my favorites, because course 5, we expose people to elements of the business that most people don't get the opportunity to actually experience. And, when we start course 5, I always tell everybody, you are about to enter the most complex phase of the product lifecycle. It's not conceptualization. It's not development. That's easy compared to what we have to live with in ILS, the integrated logistics support, the operation maintenance phase of the life cycle. And it was actually fun putting that course together, and it's a lot of fun to teach it.
And in that course, we talk about the change process and how it has to link into that. Last week's class, we touched on ILS a little bit and exactly what Ken was talking about. And one of the students in the class goes, no wonder they don't like us. Because they're always asking us, hey, what are you guys sending down to us? Why doesn't anybody talk to us? And I asked the question back to the whole class. I said, so why aren't we talking to ILS during your analysis phase, during the business decision and implementation phase? And for everybody in the room, the answer was, we don't know why we don't.
Yeah.
So we start talking to people. I go, invite them in. Why would you be designing something or producing something that they're going to have more difficulty in maintaining? And to Ken's point, the reason is most of the people on that side of the house have never worked in iOS.
That's
Have
right.
to process and manage kits and everything else, get access to products from customers and all the complexities of implementation, right? And I always tell them the story, and I told them last week as we got into discussion on effectivities and KPIs and metrics, right? And everybody was going like, yeah, well, we track how long it takes for a change to close. And of course, we had a big discussion on what does that really mean, right?
Yeah.
It isn't when I'm done with it and I throw it over to the factory. It's not closed, right?
Mhm.
For the factory, it's closed when it's implemented in the product. But then I always tell them, I go, so by the way, if your organization is tracking how good you are at closing changes, for service, iOS, you could have a change that's open for 5 years. What's that going to do to their metrics?
Yeah.
Well, why would we? Well, because the change isn't closed until the last unit's been upgraded. If we had that, there's nothing bad about that. It's just we want to track it, and we want to know that we still have 200 units left, that it's been 3 years and we still haven't had access to them, so we haven't upgraded them. And it's okay. And we probably do a whole hour session just on KPI metrics. But it's just amazing how people get into these things of, well, process time is 5 days, right? That's when engineering gave it to us and we turned it into the next group and CM's done with it. That's our process time. That's not the process time, right?
No.
It's not. To me, there's so much in the interfaces, right?
Mhm.
And from a product perspective, it's all about the interfaces, right? That makes or breaks you all the time. The interface to the vehicle. Does your seat fit in your vehicle? Does your seat base fit to the seat bun? All the things. And it's the same inside of a business as well. The interfaces are so important.
Thank you, Brandy. So going forward, now when I talk about from the factory to service or engineering service, I'm going to tell them, you guys got to stop delivering them a bag of poop.
Yes, and stop putting that bag on fire, because that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, but
you got to stop on it.
To your point, I bet you a majority of people who have to manage the implementation of changes in service probably would agree with you 100%.
Well,
That's what he
no doubt.
Yeah.
Yes.
No doubt.
And it's not even just like the interfaces with people, right? Engineering to manufacturing. It's also in the life cycle.
Oh, yeah.
And
Of
sometimes
course.
we forget to think about it from that bigger picture perspective too. And so sometimes the life cycle just seems more like a business decision,
Well, it's not just about change. It's about getting an understanding of not just ILS, but also decommissioning if the organization is going to be involved.
Mhm.
We need to have representation from those life cycle phases all the way up front during initial development.
That's too much work, Ken. That's way too much work.
I know. Yeah. Well, why? They're not, we got to get product out the door, right? So the whole thing is anything, and this is sad, anything that's going to slow down the development process that would impede their ability to meet that first committed product delivery date is not going to get done. Or it'll be fought and resisted as hard as it can be.
Within all of our courses, there's not one course where we don't talk about all the life cycle phases, right? And the importance they need to be linked and taken into consideration and stuff like that. And even though we focus on the iOS in course 5, we talk about it from day one, right? And stuff like that. And that's important. And I think that's one of the issues that occurs in companies. They don't talk enough about those interfaces, as you were saying, Brandy, right? They're not talking about, hey, let's make sure as part of the design process. And they probably go through workshops where they're told to do that, but it's not ingrained in their culture and it's not pushed by management. Management is still saying, I got to get a development unit into production so we can start shipping product. And if somebody tells them, slow down, we need another month so we can make sure it can service it right and everything else, it's just all hell breaks loose, right?
Yep. I call it handoffs. You call it linkages. It's all the same.
Handoffs, linkages,
So, we've talked a lot about history and things in the past and things you guys remember. I'd like to just for a second, just talk about the future, just real quick. And I know there's a lot of things out there that talk about AI in the future and all sorts of things going on. But from your perspectives, what are some of the biggest challenges you see on the horizon for CM professionals?
I think part of the biggest challenges are, so with AI, we have some of our IpX Congress members are working on AI stuff already. But I think as things get more automated, as you include AI, that foundational stuff will become even more important, because what all that's going to allow us to do is to transfer information, gather information more quickly, right? But how do I make sure that that information is the right information that I should be making the decisions on, right? So the proper ownership of the information is still going to be critical. The proper linkages are going to be critical, right? Because I know of companies who are making decisions based off of data they thought was good, but it really wasn't, because they only got part of the picture, right? So all those linkages. So I think going forward, the role of CM, and I've been talking this to my students for quite a few years now, and you can see it just over the last 20 years, the role of CM is going to become even more important, right?
Totally agree with that. And the thing about AI, what is AI? It's not magic. AI is not magic. AI is hardware and software. That's it. And so how we manage hardware and software doesn't change just because we gave it this combination of hardware and software, a different name. Over there, it was called a computer. Over there, it's called AI. We still have to do the same things. We still have to manage all of the associated requirements. The hardware requirements for AI, we need to manage those. The software requirements for AI, we need to manage those. They're just requirements. That's why, again, I stated it earlier. I don't care what environment you want to talk about. I don't care what kind of product or deliverable you want to talk about. I don't care if it's hardware, software, service, whatever. It's requirements. It's the requirements that we need to manage. If we can manage all of our requirements correctly, the physical manifestation of those requirements becomes the easy part. So I don't see any difference in the need for CM as the future evolves. I do see it becoming more and more important as technology advances and things become quote unquote smarter or faster. Yeah, I like what Ray said. If current practices or current processes or current tools and methodologies are giving us broken results, and we ramp it all up with new high-speed tools, we just get the broken results faster.
Yes, the quality of your output is directly related to the quality of your input, right? We can get bad data faster or more bad data if we want to.
That's right.
Yeah. So Ken, you were talking about hardware and software and AI and everything else. But the one thing is that hardware and software is getting much better, because I am a representation of Ray Wozny. He is on vacations. How did
I? Yeah.
I agree with you guys 1,000,000%. I think people are worried about, CM roles being replaced by Autobots, things like that. So I think in general, it's just going to become more and more important. The more digital we are, the more important you need people to make sure that you've got the right data in the right place, no duplicates, and that everything's linked properly, and kind of owning all of that. So to me, it's a lot. I think CM starts to elevate to thinking about it from a bigger enterprise level, even more so than today. And, still there's just so many people that think about it from just an engineering perspective.
Right.
So the more our tools are connected and the more that, we can follow that thread all the way through, the more important is when you need someone to figure out how to manage it, where to manage it, who's going to manage it, what's the process to management, what are the roles and responsibilities, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at really the percentage of our customers who understand that enterprise solution is still relatively small.
Yes.
Right? Most of them are still, they're focused on product, right? The product configuration management, product requirements. And they get that. And they're trying to say, yeah, we need to manage that. And then we're still reminding them, yeah, but what tells you how to do all of that? All of that needs to be managed. And they're like, oh, well, yeah, but the one thing with all the new tools and the AI and everything else, those gaps will become more visible very quickly. So that enterprise perspective of CM, I think that's where the growth in CM is going to be probably greater, is as companies recognize that, hey, we have all these other business processes that are not managed. We have this one group called CM for our product, and they're doing a great job, and they have all this stuff together and connected and everything else. But we've got all this other stuff, and some of it's in our quality management system, some of it's not anywhere, some of it's they've got their own structures and everything else, but there's not a common language in how it's managed, how it's structured, and all of that. And that's what still causes the disruptions and the linkages, right?
Yes. Very true. All right, I think I've got two more questions for you gentlemen for today. And the first one here is just, thinking about everyone who's listening. And we know people are struggling with implementing CM2 in their roles, no matter if that's a high level leadership position down to, a change leader or someone, an entry level engineer, et cetera. Everyone's struggling to implement CM2 just because, work is fast paced and it's just hard to do. Sometimes change is just hard. What resources do you recommend to anyone out there who's struggling to implement CM2 in their roles?
So first of all, to your point, I was talking earlier in our conversation about processes and writing processes under control. If you brought in everybody that's kind of involved in the change process, you brought them into a room and said, hey, all of you working change process, how many of you want to help us fix the change process? Everybody's going to go, well, that's not my job. I wasn't hired for that, right? And so ensuring that we've got the right resources available, right, to have oversight of the process, those process experts, right, what we call change leaders, change implementation leaders, auto release analysts, having those roles in place is critical to be able to support the process. I think the other thing is that from, the people who are trying to implement this and running into those walls. I mean, at IpX, right, we do have the ability to do presentations to your management to get them some understanding, right? But we also have we have a powerful services organization whose job, guess what, is to go in and do that work that nobody wants to do of the processes and helping you identify what KPIs you need, helping you identify what an efficient workflow is in a particular area and stuff like that. So sometimes it does make sense to bring in the experts, right, to help us in areas that we're not expert on yet, right? And so, yeah, we can get the training. Just because I have the training, I can read a medical book doesn't mean I'm going to be able to do surgery tomorrow. Well, maybe. I don't know. It depends what kind of surgery. But
Well, you could. We just don't know if it'll be successful.
yeah, so I need to be able to bring in the experts to help guide me, right? And I think the one thing that's unique about our service group is that our goal is not to be with our customers long term. We want to get in, help you, find out what's going on, help you fix those things, get you the knowledge to do it so you can kind of go along on your own after that. And then we'll come back as needed to help you with the next area you're having difficulties and stuff like that. So, and if I just want to brag a little bit, I was probably one of the few consulting companies in the world who aren't all about, let's just lock these guys down on hours, right? We're there to do specific things to help a company move forward and stuff like that.
And at times we're good therapists too.
That's right.
Yeah. Amen. Right. Because again, a lot of times the change process is a big area of stress for companies.
Oh, it is.
People don't like it. They blame everything on a change process. Well, we were delayed here. It must have been a change process fault. It must have been CM's fault, right? Because they had it for 5 days, right? Yeah, we know they had it for 200 days and they had it for 200, but that 5 days, it's their fault, right? So being able to go in and have that understanding and work with those people and say that, hey, let's help you get that message out and get the process in place so people understand here's what the real workflow is, right? And here's where our part of it is, and here's where all the handoffs have to happen and everything else.
The core competency of these organizations isn't to do that kind of work. It is the core competency of our services group. That's exactly what they do. They are the experts at it. And that's a deliverable, not only helping the organizations do the things that they need to do, but it's an actual deliverable to the customer, which is huge.
Yeah. One of the things when we talk about just resources that we recommend, this one's a little bit different, but it's again, thinking about ownership. We talk a lot about ownership, and there's always a VP of engineering, a VP of operations, VP of quality. And I know in our ideal world, we would love a VP of CM, right? But
we have that in some organizations.
Yes, but like our VP of engineering, they own the engineering development process, right? They would say, yes, I do. Same thing with operations, same. So what I often find in organizations is there is not always an owner of the CM process.
Let me step in. This actually happened. I was on site at a company many years ago, and I got invited to, and they called it an organizational meeting. And they had all the senior leadership members in that meeting. And what the topic of discussion was where should CM report? And it was like you were talking about an orphan child that nobody wanted. Everybody, when they had their little spiel, was giving the reasons why CM should not be in their organization. And every single one of them had a reason why it should not be in their organization. The deliverable out of this meeting was supposed to be the organizational setup with CM, where they were going to be. So the one good thing about it was the agreement was that they weren't going to leave the room until that decision was made. And it was ridiculous to see what was going on. At one point, you're going to love this. At one point, one of the VPs said, well, hang on a minute. Let's find out what Ken thinks. So they're looking at me to make that decision for them. And I said, listen, I am not going to make this decision for you guys. I will tell you that some organizations are better fits than other organizations. And you already know what those are. You had that during your discussions. I said, but I've seen organizations where CM is actually under finance. And I've seen organizations where CM is under the operations side of the house. I've seen it where it's under the quality side of the house. And one of those VPs popped up and said, all right, settled. Ken said it should be in finance. I said, no, that is not what I said. So it finally boiled down to two. It was the VP of engineering and the VP of operations. They both said no. We're not leaving the room until one of you says yes. Finally, the VP of operations said, okay, fine. We'll put him in operations. And the VP of engineering said, no, you're not. It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life. Which is why ultimately, if an organization wants to be successful in this mode, CM has to be a standalone operation.
It is a delivery mechanism, sir. Just like, yes, program management and change. We often see program management as a standalone function or close to it.
Yes, indeed.
Change management is a huge delivery mechanism. People like to downplay it compared to the sexiness of program management. But if you look at the amount of product and revenue that it's representing, it's often more than new product development.
Yeah.
And I think just to kind of expand on that story, why nobody wanted him, it is true going back historically, because if you go back historically, CM was always looked at this function where all the problems happen to just funnel into problems coming from the supplier on drawings or bills of materials. Oh, get it into CM. CM, you got to fix this, right? They didn't create it, right? But you got to fix it. We got problems in the factory. The drawings aren't here on time. Purchasing can't get drawings. Everything was focused on CM. So CM had this reputation of being this thing where it was just always a mess, right? And kind of churning all this stuff and everything else. And so management that's been in business for a while, that are, getting older in age and everything else, that's their experience with CM. So when somebody says, hey, you should have the CM group, they're going like, oh my goodness, no, why would I want that?
Why would I want that?
I can remember me going down the hall and yelling at them and stuff like that. So and what they don't realize, and I've seen it happen in probably the last 10 years, it's gotten a lot of growth, but over the last 5 or 6, where companies are actually recognizing the importance of it. I had a company that I was doing some work for medical device company down in San Diego. They had a director of CM. People were fighting over him in his organization because they wanted it, right? And he was telling me, yeah, engineering, operations, quality, they all want us. And I've been told who I get to pick. And I told him, pick your own. Tell them I want to be the same level they do.
Yep.
And that's the reality where it should be and stuff like that. But I think as the new generations are coming up, as we're seeing the digital thread going on, all this model-based stuff, people who are interfacing with CM are seeing the value. And so it's not that it wasn't respected by those who worked around it and in it before, but the other organizations are starting to understand that, oh, it's not this black hole. They're responsible for making sure that things are running smoothly for my product, for the processes in the enterprise. So there's got to be a close relationship with quality, with program management, with all of those.
So we have this IpX Congress that you guys are well aware of, but it consists of individuals across industry who are CM2 certified, and you've taken the training, and we come together once a month, and we have presentations, discussions, dialogues. We're there to mentor and support each other, working through problems and implementing this kind of stuff. And we had a session on this last year of where we called it, Where's Waldo? And where does CM2 belong in your organization, right? And we had the same discussion. And just like you said, we had someone from all the different industries, they were all saying, well, mine's in engineering, mine's in operations, mine's in quality,
Yeah.
and so where does it belong? And we talked about, how it should be ideally, if we had our druthers of its own function, et cetera, standalone, similar to engineering, quality, whatnot. But, I think what surprised me about Ken's story, which I understand it's a necessary evil, it's, CM's the problem magnet, but it's also a really fit for purpose, flexible delivery mechanism to solve whatever problem you want to solve. So if I was quality and I had a bunch of quality problems, why would I not want to own configuration management group so I
Yeah.
can work in what I need to accomplish? Because you can make different robust decisions. You can have the rigor be different. You can completely design a process with requirements to do what you need it to do. So if I was a function that wanted to try to accomplish something, owning CM might be a really great idea.
It would be a great idea.
Yeah, especially in today's world, I think, as it's become, there's more information, there's more training available. It's become a more professional position type of thing and everything else. Absolutely. I mean, it's like, why not bring the experts into my organization and now have them, not that they would really do this, but I'll have them help me in my organization first.
Well,
So
they
we can be really good. And
That's
then
right.
we'll go and help the other guys too that didn't want them, right?
You can manage the portfolio of
Yes.
resources across the business and
Right.
prioritize what you need. So it's a great prioritization mechanism across your business to focus on what the business needs at that point in time.
Yeah, that brings up a whole nother topic when you start talking about prioritization. Wouldn't it be interesting if we could show an organization how they no longer have to worry about priorities, particularly in their factory, but in any work center, right? Organizations that work to priorities, trust me, 100% of the time, if an organization is working to priorities, they have an unbelievable amount of intervention resource expenditure. And Ray was talking earlier about how all the pieces in the CM2 model, how all the pieces kind of fit together. And when you fit all the pieces together correctly in CM2, the only time you see a priority is when the CRB is establishing the resource expenditure level that's being authorized for the implementation activity. That's it. Because once you get to the CIB and you build the implementation plan, we're driving the organization by schedules, not by priority. We don't care what the priority is. We use the priority when we establish the schedule. So all of a sudden, you don't see a whole bunch of priority work running around anywhere in the organization. We're working to schedule.
What? Oh my God, if you take away urgent changes, what will I do?
No,
I run around with for the next 3 days.
Cow, are you crazy?
How many tamales do you have on that? Is it one hot tamale or two or three or four?
I'm telling you, you got your priority 3, priority 2, priority 1, then you got your hot ones, and you got your superintendent's list, and you got the VP's list, and you got the CEO's list. And
if everyone could just imagine going to work and doing what they had planned to do that day or that entire week just once, if people could just imagine that.
Yeah, I know it's crazy, but when you put all of the CM2 puzzle pieces together, that's one of the things that you get.
Yes, it is. All right. I've got one really, really, really tough question for you guys left. If you could be an animal, what would it be and why?
Oh, boy.
There's my answer right there.
Raccoon.
I would be Randy Raccoon, because it kind of looks like me in a tuxedo with a mask on and everything else, because raccoons, they're considered to be almost like a rodent. But when they're in your yard and they're kind of eating stuff, they're kind of cute. So people like them. So think CM people, right? They kind of like them, and they have to get into the garbage to really get to stuff, right? They got to dig through the garbage to get through the good stuff and everything else. And that's kind of like sometimes what we have to do in CM is get through the garbage to get to the good stuff. So I would definitely be Randy Raccoon dressed like that one.
Okay. I think I would be a bald eagle.
Bald eagle.
Yeah, because you look at things from a higher perspective. You get to look down and get the real lay of the land. And I just think it'd be cool to be able to fly like that. What would you do?
I'd be a monkey.
That works.
I mean, who doesn't love monkeys? Everyone loves monkeys.
I don't know. You ever had a monkey come after you?
No, they're always very friendly. They just like sit on your shoulder or, or.
No, I thought you were going to say, yeah, same thing. There was one time I had to go after somebody for not doing something, and you should have seen him running.
Well, they are fast and they can
Yes,
swing
they
around.
are.
So
Monkeys are cute, except some of them have that bare spot on their butts. So
Yeah.
if you're okay with that, Brandy, I mean,
I can pick which monkey I choose, I suppose.
Okay.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. I really appreciate the time and the interrogation. And it's always great spending time with you guys.
All right. No,
Yeah,
thank
same
you.
to
It was
you.
fun. I had a great time.
Thank you for tuning in today. Don't forget to subscribe and review the show. And for more information on IpX, visit ipxhq.com.